So if you remember, the contact position is the sort of medium point, and the passing position is not quite as low as the contact, it's not quite as high as the high point, but it's just a little bit higher. So we're going to use our reference lines to do this. But without using the onion skinning technique, it's going to be really hard to do this. So we'll come to where we're going to add in our new key, this first passing position here at 7, and we'll add that guy in. So we'll come to here, we're going to duplicate our temp. This is going to be our extreme 7, move it up, color code it. These are all going to be red in this case because they're all going to be keys for me, but normally I'd have red for my extremes, green for my breakdowns, and blue for my in-betweens. We'll bring this guy over here, and we can make use of onion skinning again. Now by default, if I just turn on onion skinning, we're not going to see anything. We have to remember what we did with those settings. So let's look at onion skin settings. This was set to 50% on the max opacity. Now spacing here is important. How many frames do you want to look at before? How many frames do you want to look at after? So if I, for example, was to increase frames before to 4, you can see that I stepped back 1, 2, 3, back to here, and you can actually see that first contact position just starting to come through. If I were to put this to 1 and set this to 4 frames after, in fact this is going to need to be more than 4, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see that the middle contact position is showing, and if you wanted to do a blend of the two, you'd do 4 and 7, and you get a blend of the two drawings. Although in this case it's not really necessary to do that. So I'm just going to look at my first drawing here and click OK, and I'm all ready to start drawing my passing position here at extreme 7. Make sure your timeline is in the right place, make sure you have extreme 7 selected, and we'll start drawing this. So it needs to be slightly higher up. I like to put his back just a little bit further, sort of arching back as he's stepping up in this case. So let's do that. Let's get our brush. Let's put him slightly higher up, something like this. Obviously the more you exaggerate it, the more extreme it's going to be. Something like this. And you know what, let's actually marquee that, and let's just drag this back a little bit to straighten out his back. And you'll sometimes get drawing errors, and if you do that when you move things around, you can simply just adjust your time slide here and everything. It's just a graphics card drawing error. It's quite easy to fix. So we got his back leaning back a little bit there. Perhaps not too much. Now his arms are going to be down by his side, and you think about it, if he's stepping forward, this onion skin I'm looking at is his contact position, he's stepping forward, his right leg is coming back, his right arm is coming forward. Now there's a couple of ways you could do this. You could just draw it straight down by his side, which is actually what I'm going to do just because it's sort of the most simple example here. But if you think about the concept of breaking joints and loosening things up, you might find it better to actually break the joint backwards like that. Now it would look really quite unnatural when it's paused, but it would actually cause the joints to flow and look more natural as this arm is coming back. But because I'm not going to complete this example, I'm going to show you another one I did earlier, just using a straighter arm, then we're just going to stick with that approach here. So we'll just bring this arm down a little bit. The shoulders are sort of back in the middle, and we'll have his hand sort of here, his arms sort of coming down to here, like that. We wouldn't see the other arm because it's behind his body, so that makes sense. The legs, however, think about it, this position is halfway between this contact and this contact. So that leg is making a full transition from front to back. And so he's actually stepping on his leg at this frame. So his leg, his right leg I should say, is going to be coming back like this with a slight kink to it. So we'll do that. Bring this back. And then put that foot in flat on the ground as he's bringing it back. something like this. And his head, if you want, I would actually probably bring this back a little bit. It's going to be higher still. So his head, it's passing, so we'll do something like this. Again, trying to keep the same sort of volume, the same sort of shape. And his left leg, which is furthest away, is actually passing, because this is the passing position. So we can actually take his left leg, and it's up in the air. And it's amazing how low to the ground your toes get when you're actually bringing that leg forward. So we'll do something like this. Something like that. And at this point, I think I'm done with the onion skinning. So I'm just going to turn that off and solidify the drawing. So we'll come in, start to detail this a little bit more. This is going to be fairly flat to the ground. This leg, of course, is going to be in the background, furthest away from us. And we'll shade it in to show that, otherwise we're going to get really confused. Alright, let's bring this arm in a bit more. Remember, the process of animation is not quick. In fact, it's very time consuming. So if you want to be a quick animator, it's probably not going to happen. It's probably not the field for you. So you want to keep that in mind and be prepared to spend time on your drawings. And remember, this is just a rough pass. So ordinarily I would come over this with some a nice black brush, and I would carefully plot this out, or maybe even convert it into vector-based graphics and draw in some vectors. I'll do something like this. Okay, so that is going to be our passing position. And in fact, we can even do a quick roll here. You can start to see how that breaks down. Now, if I were going to do the next passing position on the opposite side, of course what I would do is exactly what I did before. Create a new temp layer, put it close to this layer, use onion skinning, and trace it, and then just reverse the shading there. So in this particular example, I'm not going to draw that out again, just to save time. I'm going to move on now to my recoil position, which is going to be when the body is at its lowest. So I'll do the same kind of thing, and I'll grab a new temp layer, right click and duplicate it out. This will be my recoil at extreme 4. So extreme 4, red. And if you want, you can actually name these as, contact, recoil, passing, and high point if you want, as well as doing these. But this is how I'm kind of used to labeling my frames. So I'm going to keep using this technique. So we'll come down, make sure that we put this in the right spot. And what I'm actually going to do is use onion skinning again to compare the contact to the passing position. And I'm going to look at my settings and try and get a nice blend of the two. So let's lower this to 3 to 2. And let's increase the frames after. Let's do 4, 3, 2. Those are nice and light, so I'll go with that. Make sure you leave your timeline where it is, make sure you've got the correct frame selected, and we'll zoom in and we'll start doing the recoil position. The body is coming down for the recoil, it's coming below the line here, so be very cautious about that. Start to draw in your body, and if you don't get it in quite the right place, you can just hold down Control or Command on a Mac. Let's just push it up a little bit. I don't want it to be too extreme. You can also use the arrow keys to nudge, and I find that tends to cause the graphics card to glitch out a little less. So it's a little tip there. Let's bring his shoulders down accordingly. Again, we're trying to maintain his volume, keep it consistent, and I'm trying to, I think, go too dark too quickly here with the onion skinning turned on. I should learn from my mistakes and do that later, so I'll just rough this in. At the recoil position, the arms are at their furthest apart. So if you can imagine, the right arm is going to be moving forward. Before it actually starts to move forward, it moves back. So it's going to go from here, it's going to move back into its furthest position and then come quite quickly down here. So we'll do that like this. We'll make sure that we know that his right arm is coming back, so it's going to be drawn further back. We'll sort of rough out how long that arm might be, something like this. And again, it's all down to how much you decide to exaggerate this. Try and think of this curve though. Look at this curve that's coming through here and mark where that would be. So probably something like this, I would think. Come up here. We'll call that good for now. And then they imagine that curve, that arc, the arm coming back in the other direction. His left arm furthest apart is going to be further forward, and probably doing something like this, with his hand being maybe, you could have a little bit of overlap and follow through here, but again, to keep it consistent with my previous example, I'm probably just going to do something like this. And maybe that arm's a little bit too long, so we'll just grab that and push it back a little bit. That's the beauty of considering this to be a rough layer, is you can just come in and make corrections where you need to. So I'll do something like that. Now the legs. So he is pushing down. He started off like this. He's moving over his right leg and coming down into a sort of a stance where he's lower. So that leg is there. Remember, because he's walking on the spot, you've got to kind of imagine his feet gliding. So this would be sort of halfway between these two positions here. This is his contact here. This is his passing, so his foot is sort of halfway, somewhere like this. So come down like this. And then the other leg, again, is sort of halfway between this extreme and this extreme here. So it would probably be something like this. He's kicking off that foot. So let's kind of push this one in here and then get this one looking roughly how we want it to. Sometimes I have a tendency to scrunch the legs up when I'm doing the recoil position, which is kind of frustrating, but practice, practice. So the head, let's bring his head down. We'll kind of bring it here. We've dropped his shoulders by this much, so we'll do the head roughly the same. And we'll do something like this. I think that's good enough to work with, so let's turn it off, onion skinning, and we'll solidify the drawing. So come in here, this arm is in front, so let's bear that in mind. It's a little easier to get the left and rights a bit more interesting when your character itself is a little bit more interesting. But even when you're doing a character with a custom design, I still recommend practicing first with Mr. Generic here, because it's just that much easier to do and you don't have to worry about it so much. I think that arm is still a little bit long, so let's do something like this. Clean this up. Okay, this arm is behind, shade it in. This arm is in front. Legs, let's come and do those next. Again, be cautious about volume and trying to keep everything consistent. And this leg is furthest away, so we'll shade it in. And then we'll flesh in the body. And we'll call that good for now. Okay, so now again we can actually start doing some rolling here. So you can kind of see how that's working. And again, I would do a onion skin, and I'd probably pull this layer out just to get it out of the way, and undo a new layer and onion skin next to that to do the reverse for the other side of the cycle. But again, in this video, the last one I'm going to work on is going to be his high point, which is going to be here at 10. So we'll do a brand new layer and we'll start doing the high point. In order to do this then, I'm going to grab a new temp layer, duplicate it out. The high point is going to be at 10, so we'll do extreme 10. We'll move it into position here, right click, make that red, and drag it out to where it belongs. So again, onion skinning on, and we'll do the settings so that we can tweak it. And you can see that I can only see the frame before, so let's actually lower this down, and let's increase the frames after. This all depends on where you have your time slider. I've got it back a bit further, so let's increase that. Alright, I think that works. Yeah, so now we can come in, make sure we've got the time slider in the right place, make sure we have the correct layer selected, and start thinking about the high point. Now the high point obviously is going to be that much higher than where we were with the passing position, so we need to come up to here. I also want to have him leaning forward a little bit as well, so let's bear that in mind. We're going to have him quickly sort of jump forward as he pushes off and gets ready to land. So there's going to be more of a jump here. So let's start to plan this out. We're going to have the body at its highest, so something like this. Trying to maintain volume. Should remember to use my arrow keys with the control key held down. And then bring his body forward a bit and up. Quite a bit actually. So something like this. And then fill out the volume, fill out the body, something like this. And think about those legs. So this leg from the passing position is now pushing back. So it's going to be almost the same as this contact position leg here. The toe's going to be in the same sort of spot, but the body's higher. So essentially the leg's going to be straighter. So let's bear that in mind. And let's bring down this right leg so it's a little straighter. Remember, he's pushing off and he's giving himself momentum to push his body into that next step. So something like this. And the other leg is reaching. His left leg, the one that's furthest away from us, is reaching for this contact position here. So we'll bring this forward and down, and it's reaching, and it's going to flip up into that position essentially. So we'll do something like this. Okay. And his arms are also transitioning. His arm is transitioning from, if we move back, the side position here to the front position here. So it's going to be sort of halfway in between. So again, think about that arc, think about where that hand would come to, and then adjust accordingly. Bearing in mind his body's actually a little bit higher up now. Just rough that in. And the other arm is coming in the other direction, but I'm going to put it just sort of so it's just peeking out from behind the body here. Something like that. And his head will bring forward and up. Something like that. Okay, let's not forget which leg is which, so we'll just put a little bit of shading for now. This arm here is going to be shaded. And we're done with the onion skins for the time being. Onion skins off. Now we can start to try and solidify the legs a bit. Something like this. And this leg is furthest away. And remember to shade. I think his knee's a little bit low there. We can always tweak that later. His leg is in front. And then his arms just coming forward a little bit. And each time you've done one of these poses, make sure you roll the time slider. You want to make sure that everything's in the right place. And if stuff is moving too fast, it might mean that you've moved it too close to one frame, too far away from another. Keep checking. Don't just draw out 10 frames straight ahead and then assume your timing is going to be right, because straight ahead animation is going to give you something that's much less predictable. Alright, I think that's going to be good enough for now. Let's turn off onion skinning. It's already turned off. Do a quick roll. And now you can see how he's actually starting to build up that walk. And again, the process is the same, but just doing opposing legs, opposing arms for these other frames here, and just use that tracing method in order to do that. But what I'd like to do is show you one that I have created before, and this will give you an idea of what the finished product will look like.